begins in a quiet corner of Manila where Eduardo, Lolo Ed, Ramos, a 67-year-old Filipino military veteran, lived a life that felt smaller each passing year. His neighborhood was a patchwork of rusted rooftops, narrow alleys, and tired faces, people doing their best to survive another day. Lolo Ed blended right in. He rented a tiny room barely big enough for a bed and an old wooden chair. His pension was so small that it felt like an insult to the decades he served, but he never complained, he only smiled and said, "Life has been harder before." But deep inside, he carried heavy loneliness. His wife was gone, his son had left the country years ago, and communication slowly faded until it disappeared completely. The only thing that kept his spirit alive was music. Every evening, after the sun dipped behind Manila Bay, he walked to Rizal Park, where an old public piano stood under a rusted shelter. Its keys were yellowed, chipped, sometimes sticky, but to him it was a treasure. When he sat down to play, people who passed by never forgot the sound. He didn't play with speed or fancy technique. Instead, he played with memory, emotion, and the quiet pain of someone who had lost too much but still hoped for something better. Some nights, he performed for only 3 or 4 strangers. Other nights, children gathered around him, staring in awe as the music poured out of him like water from a deep well. One night, a young vlogger named Arnel recorded him playing a melody so heartbreaking that even the camera shook a little. The song had no name. It was something Lolo Ed created from the memories of fallen comrades, from the grief of losing his wife, and from the silence of years without family. The video went viral overnight. Thousands of viewers shared it, calling him the pianist with the soul of a nation. Comments poured in, people wanted to help him, meet him, listen to him. Among those who watched the video were the producers of AGT Manila 2025. They saw something rare, something pure, something the world needed to hear. They contacted him through email and an invitation appeared in his inbox at a small computer shop. When he read the message, he froze. His hands trembled. Tears rolled down his cheeks, dripping onto the keyboard as the shop owner tapped his shoulder gently. For the first time in decades, someone believed he was worth noticing. He practiced every night afterward, preparing for a moment he never dreamed would come. Begins with Lolo Ed walking into the massive AGT Manila audition venue. The noise, the lights, the crowd, all of it felt overwhelming. Young singers, dancers, magicians, rappers, even acrobats filled the hall, each rehearsing loudly, each full of energy. But there in the corner stood an elderly man in a faded military jacket, holding a folded paper with shaky handwriting and a small ID photo taped to it. Staff members assisted him kindly, guiding him backstage. When he stepped onto the stage, the audience fell into curious silence. Simon Cowell, part of the international judging lineup, raised his eyebrows with interest. Simon asked, "Sir, may we know your name and why you're here today?" Lolo Ed answered gently, "I'm here to share my music, sir. Maybe someone will remember me." His voice cracked slightly, and the judges softened. When the music began, his fingers moved slowly at first, then with growing emotion. He played a melody that felt like a confession of a lifetime, regret, sacrifice, love, and lost dreams all woven into sound. The arena grew so silent that even the cameras seemed to stop breathing. People wiped their tears as the notes filled the air. When the last chord faded, the silence broke into a thunder of applause. Simon stood, visibly emotional, wiping the corner of his eye. Judge Bianca stepped forward, saying, "For all the heroes we forgot to thank, this is for you." She slammed the golden buzzer. Confetti exploded as Lolo Ed covered his face in disbelief. For the first time in years, he felt seen, heard, and celebrated. His journey had officially begun. Begins the morning after the golden buzzer, when the entire Philippines wakes up talking about one man, Eduardo, Lolo Ed, Ramos. News anchors replayed his audition, TikTok users created edits of Simon crying, and Facebook feeds overflowed with his photos. Children imitated his performance on toy keyboards, and grandparents proudly shared posts saying, "He represents all of us." Yet despite the sudden fame, Lolo Ed woke up in the same small room, with the same thin mattress and the same quiet surroundings. But something felt different. When he stepped outside to buy pan de sal, people recognized him instantly. Strangers waved, some hugged him tightly, some thanked him for his service, and others simply smiled with deep respect. He didn't understand how something he had been doing alone for decades, playing music at a park, suddenly mattered to so many. But he felt grateful. The AGT Manila team invited him to rehearse at their studio, but he politely refused the private room offered to him. "My music comes from where my pain is," he explained. "And that place is still the park." So he continued practicing at the old piano under the rusted shelter in Rizal Park. Each day, larger crowds gathered. Some brought snacks, others brought bottled water, and many left letters thanking him for touching their hearts. Older veterans visited him too, saluting him with pride. One evening, while he was playing a soft, melancholic piece, a man in his 40s approached him quietly. He wore casual clothes and a backpack, and he stood for several minutes before speaking. "Sir, do you remember me?" Lolo Ed paused, studying the man's face. There was something familiar in his eyes. The man smiled emotionally. "I'm Marco, you taught me piano when I was a kid. I used to come to the base with my father." Suddenly, memories rushed back. An awkward boy with thin arms, always humming and asking questions about chords and melodies. Now he stood taller, more confident, and clearly successful. Marco explained that he had become a music producer because of those early lessons. "You changed my life," he said. "Let me help you now." He offered to coach him for the semi-finals, create arrangements for his performance, and stand by him every step of the way. Lolo Ed felt overwhelmed but grateful. For the first time in a long time, he felt supported not just by strangers but by someone whose life he had unknowingly shaped. Episode 4 arrives on the night of the semi-finals. The arena glowed with thousands of lights. Fans held signs that read, "We love you, Lolo Ed," and "Veterans are heroes." Backstage, he sat quietly with Marco beside him. Simon Cowell walked in briefly, giving him a warm nod and saying, "You moved the world once. Just play from your heart again." When it was his turn, he stepped onto the massive stage carrying something in his pocket, a folded list of the names of his fallen comrades. His hands shook slightly, but his eyes were steady. The lights dimmed until only a single spotlight remained. He closed his eyes and began to play a piece he composed called, "For Those Who Fell But Never Faded." Each note sounded like a memory, heavy but beautiful. Behind him, huge screens showed slow images of Philippine mountains, sunsets over rice fields, and waving flags. The music built with quiet intensity, then softened into a tender tribute. Halfway through, he whispered the names of his fallen friends under his breath. The microphone barely caught the sound, but the emotion was unmistakable. People in the audience began crying, some holding their hands over their hearts. When the final note faded, the silence was profound, almost sacred. Then the entire arena erupted into applause that shook the walls. Simon stood immediately, clapping with rare intensity. He leaned into the microphone and said, "This is what real artistry looks like. This is a man telling the story of his country." The judges unanimously advanced him to the grand finals. As he walked off the stage, Marco hugged him tightly. That night, Lolo Ed realized he wasn't just a contestant, he had become the voice for thousands of forgotten heroes. Begins in the days leading to the grand finals, when Lolo Ed found himself busier than he had been in decades. TV reporters waited outside the AGT Manila studio every afternoon hoping to interview him. Radio stations requested phone calls. News anchors said his story represented every Filipino who had been forgotten, overlooked, or left behind. But the attention wasn't what affected him most. What shook him were the quiet moments, when people approached him with tears in their eyes and whispered, "My father was a veteran too," or when young kids hugged him and said, "Lolo, you inspire us." Still, fame brought pressure. At night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if he deserved all this love. "I'm just an old man who plays the piano," he told Marco one evening. But Marco answered gently, "No, sir. You're reminding people that every life has a melody worth hearing." Meanwhile, journalists began digging into his past. Photos from his early years resurfaced, black and white images of him playing piano during military ceremonies, smiling proudly in uniform, standing next to a woman who was once the love of his life. Reporters revealed that he used to be respected within the military for his musical talent. Some described him as the gentle soldier who healed hearts with his piano. But then, tragedy struck. The death of his wife in a sudden road accident shattered him, and the disappearance of his only son left him empty. He quit music for years, working odd jobs until age and hardship caught up with him. Many viewers were shocked. They couldn't believe that the man who played with such dignity had suffered so quietly. Then something happened that he never expected. A well-known news program aired an emotional segment about his missing son, showing an old photo of a young man who had left for Dubai years ago. Within days, viewers began searching the internet, spreading the story worldwide. Comments appeared from Filipinos abroad, sharing the story, tagging friends, and asking if anyone recognized him. The AGT Manila producers reached out to overseas communities. And then, on a Thursday afternoon, they approached Lolo Ed backstage. "Sir, there's someone here for you," a producer said softly. A man walked in slowly, his shoulders trembling, his eyes already red. He whispered, "Papa. It's me, it's really me." Time seemed to stop. Lolo Ed stared, unable to breathe, unable to speak. Then the man broke down crying and ran into his arms. They held each other like survivors finally reaching shore after years lost at sea. The room fell silent except for their sobs. Crew members wiped their eyes behind cameras. Even Marco stepped outside to hide his tears. Lolo Ed whispered against his son's shoulder, "I thought I lost you forever," and his son replied, "I'm sorry, Papa, I never should have stayed away so long." That reunion lit something inside Lolo Ed, something powerful, something hopeful. And it changed the meaning of his finale performance entirely. Episode 6 begins on finals night, when the entire country gathered around televisions, phones, and outdoor screens. The arena was packed, buzzing with energy, covered in signs that read, "Rise, Lolo," and "Our Golden Veteran." Backstage, he sat next to his son, who held his hand tightly. "Play for yourself tonight, Papa," he said. "Play the song you always saved for better days." When he stepped on stage, the lights lowered, and the audience fell silent. He sat at the polished black grand piano, no longer trembling, no longer alone. The piece he played, one he composed himself called, "Rise, Pilipinas," began softly, like a sunrise breaking over quiet mountains. Then it grew with rhythm and passion, blending classical piano with traditional Filipino undertones. Halfway through, the orchestra joined in, swelling into a cinematic wave of sound that filled the entire arena. People cried. People held hands. Simon covered his mouth in disbelief. The final note echoed like a heartbeat before fading into absolute silence, then the arena erupted into thunderous applause. When the host announced the results, the crowd chanted his name before the words were even spoken. The winner of AGT Manila 2025 is Eduardo "Lolo Ed" Ramos. Golden confetti rained down as his son rushed onto the stage, hugging him tightly. Lolo Ed held the trophy high, tears falling down his wrinkled cheeks, and said, "Thank you for hearing the voice of someone the world forgot." That night, the Philippines didn't just celebrate a winner, they celebrated a hero reborn.